So the case study is something that we normally do in class whenever I have this course. This is the first time I've done it completely online. There are a couple games that I normally do in class on the first day, and then the case studies we do usually on the second day of class. So it's okay because we do have some interaction with the videos and things in the Pearson, but I also wanted to try to help out with the Zoom. So of course they're optional. I'm recording them and I'll upload it to Canvas, and we'll do a Zoom on different days each week. It won't always be on a Thursday. I'll try to mix it up and maybe even do one during the day sometime around lunchtime. So before we start jumping into the case study, does anybody have any questions about the course itself?
Yeah, the track tour, where can that be found? I couldn't find it in the Pearson.
The track tour. Okay, let me get over here to Canvas and see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm not sure. I didn't think I posted that one to look at. Where are you reading it from?
It says, take the virtual company tour, the track virtual tour. Make sure you click tour at the bottom of the page under Monday, January 24th, week 3.
Oh, okay. I must have not deleted that. It's in here.
Yeah, about the
Oh,
third from the
okay.
bottom.
Yeah. All right. I meant to delete that because I had the 2 other tutorial. That was actually another case study. Now you can find it. So I'm going to toggle over to Pearson. And when you get into Pearson, and yours may be look a little bit different from mine, but you should have something over here where it lets you go to the multimedia library. And if you click on that, it might take mine a little bit to show back up. My internet's not great, especially when I'm on Zoom. Okay, here we go. So you click in here, and let's say that we're on chapter 2. So you can click on chapter 2. And if you just select all of the media and choose Find Now, everything, like all the videos that I'm posting, everything is on there. So that one is this additional case study here.
Okay.
Well, where did I see that?
Well, I guess like long story short with the whole like us transferring to online and some stuff is a little different based off of how this class was taught last semester. Should we just go based off of what we see open per each module to actually focus on doing for homework, and then whatever we see in Pearson do for homework? If we like have other, so if we have other little things where it's like, oh, she said we had to do this at the week, but we don't actually see it in Canvas, just don't worry about it. It's probably just another little hiccup.
Right. I just came across that actually in my notes somewhere, so I'm not sure, but I thought I had erased that. And Canvas is doing some crazy things on me too. Like when I post something, it took all my due dates as my post date where it released it. It changed the due dates to the release date. So I don't know, it's just crazy. I really miss Blackboard, but it is what it is, and we gotta stay with it. So I'm gonna take that down, and I will make an announcement about that.
There was one other question, especially for this week. In your notes right here, it doesn't say anything about the Zyco case study. But then there is a place for it in the module.
So the case studies I was gonna try to do during Zoom. And I see where it still says Blackboard there. Bringing it over from Blackboard, it started sending out all of these crazy messages, like old messages from Blackboard whenever they brought it over for this semester. And it's just been a crazy hassle. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of instructors that's having a hard time, but
Sounds like it's work in process.
it is. It'll probably be a few more semesters before they get Canvas ironed out. But for us, the reason why I wanted to Zoom is just so we could talk about it. There are 2 case studies actually on here. And the first one is basically just talking strategy. So if we look at that first one, it's talking about a company that's taking some of its operations out of the country or trying to become international. So it's saying the state of New Mexico's Department of Labor hired this consultant services to outsource an outsourcing firm to redo the New Mexico's unemployment compensation computer system. And then TEDA had completed work for other states. It had never worked on unemployment compensation system. So New Mexico agreed to allow TEDA to do all computer software work in India. And apparently with insufficient monitoring of progress by New Mexico officials responsible for outsourcing the project. So this new system was to be completed in 6 months. And as of the 2001 due date, it was nothing was working well. So we can go on to read this, but it gives us the processes and risks. So that's what I wanted to focus on this case study. So based on what we know from chapter 1 and chapter 2, just looking at this process and looking at the possible risks, what can New Mexico do? Just what are some general things that you can take off of the top of your head that New Mexico could do instead of running things the way they did? Hi, Clay.
Hey, hello.
Right now we're talking about the first case study, the TEDA consultant services. And this is not one you guys have to turn in, but I just want to get your wheels turning and thinking about things in an operations management perspective. And just as a little spiel here, you're going to learn a lot of things in this class that's more business related than engineering related. And many of the examples are from service industries. But I've had so many students in the past come back and say, you know, I'm really glad that we talked about those things because that's exactly what they want us to do right now in our company. So even if you're on strictly engineering side of things, profits are going to affect everybody, every department. And so knowing how some of these things are worked out if you've ever had to help purchase a piece of equipment, or, you know, even just product improvement, where you go down and you try to cut costs in your process, or, you know, try to trim material, that kind of thing. This helps you do a financial analysis of it. So it's a lot like the engineering economic analysis class, if any of you had that last semester, but it's a different spin on it, and we go through it from a logistics and management point of view, as far as how it relates to things that you might specifically do. And I know the examples are service industry, most of them, but that it's still applicable to the things that go on in production. So looking at the possible risks and the outsourcing process, but even without looking at any of this, what are some things that New Mexico could have done? They outsourced their, or they got a consultant company to handle their workers' comp system. So this consultant company found a computer company, or like a data entry type company in India, to do their project, and it was not working out for me. So what are some differences between the United States and India? Let's start there. Any takers?
I know we have difficulty with them understanding our language.
Okay.
So
So
that could be,
there's language and culture barriers, right?
language barrier, yep.
So Crystal, if you called India right now to talk to, you know, maybe your supplier over there or whatnot, they're more than likely going to be men. And many of them do not acknowledge that women are even someone that they can talk to in a business. They want to talk to a man. And that's not, you know, just because they're discriminating, that's just their culture. That
Yeah,
happens
that's
a
their
lot
culture.
in Saudi Arabia, some of the Middle Eastern companies. So you got to know who you're dealing with, number one. What else might be the barrier there besides language and culture?
Regulations.
Exactly. So we might have government regulations here that they do not have in their country, or they may have something where, you know, they can sell it in their company or their country, and it's illegal for us to sell that here. Or if it's made a certain way, we can't sell it here, especially with food or drugs, pharmaceuticals, those kinds of things. What's something else? And we're talking about workers' compensation. So does India even have workers' compensation? It's
Oh,
not
that
going to
could be
be,
an issue.
yeah, it's not going to be anything like what we have here. So their companies are more than likely, I don't know all the laws there, but I know in many countries, you know, workers are workers. They don't have to give them insurance. They don't have to give them, you know, fair wages. They don't have all of the regulations that we take advantage of here in the United States. So for them to even understand, you know, the data that they're inputting and how to, even the questions to ask, I'm sure there's a training process for them, but we have all called somebody and gotten an answer from a person in another country who knows nothing about what we're actually calling about. Okay, so there's this lack of knowledge. And not because they're dumb people, it's just they do it a different way. So I'm going to toggle over to the PowerPoint just for a minute. So some of the top things in this textbook, and I really like this textbook because it breaks it down into 10 different factors. Let me get to where. Maybe it's not on this one. It'll come up here in a second. But there's 10 different factors that it uses to just really go through logistics and the operations management side of things. And if you're looking at cost savings, whenever we talk about, okay, it takes this amount of material to make this product. It takes this amount of time to make this product with this many people. And you're kind of fixed a lot of times in your process costs, because unless you're going to do something very outrageous, like add a new machine or completely change the material or completely change the process in some way, which in itself is going to have a lot of overhead up front, your production costs are pretty much fixed. There's not going to be a whole lot of room that you can change in your production costs. Now, where you're going to save money is your logistics costs. So that has to do with everything from getting your raw materials in there to sending your product to your retail supplier or customer, or if you sell direct to actual customers. So in business, they're going to look for ways to save money more on logistics side of things than they are production side of things. And that's why operations management is so important. All three of the companies that we looked at, the Darden, Hard Rock Cafe, what was the other one right off the bat? I can't think of it. But there's
It was
several.
Frito-Lay.
Frito-Lay, okay. And then there's another one this week that I can't think of what it is now, but these authors actually have gone out and worked with all of these companies and have real examples. So that's another reason why I like to use this. So one thing that they can do is look globally for to expand internationally. Now, when you do that, you want to be strategic. You know, maybe India was not the correct place for them to get computer consultant services. Okay, maybe that it's another country that has less of a language barrier or somebody that's similar to us. Another thing, if we go through some of these things, is the supply chain. Okay, this particular case study doesn't lend to a supply chain with the information that we're given, but improving your supply chain. Darden restaurants, did you guys get to see that video yet?
Olive Garden.
No, I
Darden,
haven't.
the ones that, so I would suggest definitely watching it. I think it's like 10 or 12 minutes long, but they're the owners of like Red Lobster and an Italian garden, not Italian garden, what's the Olive Garden.
Oh,
And they order all their food from just places all around the world. And it has to come in exactly the same way, no matter where they order it from. You know, every time you go to Red Lobster, you want to know that if you're ordering this one plate, it's going to be the same every time you come in there. So in a lot of ways, that's production. We don't think of a service industry as production, but they're producing meals. And you want the same thing, just like when we go to put gasoline in our car, we want the same quality gas every time, so our car runs like it should run. Every time we buy a new phone, we want it to work better or more efficient than our last phone. So in order for these restaurants to do that, they have this huge supply chain of, people that are fishermen, shrimpers, all across the world, not just here in the United States. And they have to contract that out. If they tried to do it themselves, they would limit themselves to maybe fish and shrimp that they could find in the United States. And they'll tell you in the video, in order to be able to harvest the fish at another country, you have to live in that country. There's laws and regulations where, you can only fish within the 200 miles of a certain country's sovereign waters. So they have to delegate this out. So improving your supply chain and being more reliable in your supply chain, that's something that you constantly got to improve. What's something that's happened recently that affected the supply chain? When we go to a store, any store today, I just talked to somebody on the phone today about supply chain. What's happened recently?
The Suez Canal,
Oh.
and all the boats that are stuck out in the water.
Okay. So that can affect many aspects of we might not even know. It might be tier quadruple. I mean, I don't even know past the number 12, what you would call the supply chain, because you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. They might be tier 50 suppliers, and then we're getting an effect on that. You go to Wendy's today, and it has a little sign, we can't have all of our product because we're having supply chain issues. So then it can be a domino effect. So having multiple suppliers and expanding that supply chain to different parts of the world, so things like, a storm or a war or anything like that, if you have multiple suppliers from different places and you're strategic and you don't put all of your eggs in one basket, then you're going to be a more versatile company. So improving the supply chain is one. Reducing costs, and we just talked about this. They suggest working with companies where, some of that political red tape has been lifted. Now, people can go back and forth with NAFTA. I know a lot of people that loved it, a lot of people that hated it. I do know a lot of people that lost their jobs because of it. But it's here, so companies are taking advantage. So some of those strategic locations can actually lower your costs in logistics. And then improving your operations. Some things like automation can help. And again, people can go back and forth because, if you automate something, somebody's losing a job more than likely. But a lot of times in the long run, you're not really losing jobs. You're actually gaining different jobs. Now that turnaround might be a whole lot longer. It might take 2 or 3 or 4 years before they realize that and have a different kind of workforce, a different kind of skilled workforce. But automation is one way. And then understanding your markets. Okay, Hard Rock Cafe, that was the other one. They understood their markets. They only put their stores or the restaurants in vacation spots. So 70% of their clientele are tourists. What do tourists do? They want to spend money. So if I'm just the average Joe and I want to go out to eat on a Thursday night instead of cooking supper, I'm not going to the Hard Rock Cafe. But if I'm out on vacation and I'm already spending money, yes, I'm going to splurge and go to the Hard Rock Cafe. And they inspect all of the places because they're all across the world now. But they go in and inspect the culture of that world or the city, wherever they're locating, and make sure that the people there are actually going to be customers. Do they like rock music? Do they know who all of these singers are that they have their paraphernalia posted on the wall. So they go in and research the market and understand who the audience is in that city before they put a store there. There was, okay, so cultural, ethical issues, we talked about that. And here's just a little list of things that companies want to consider. Work ethic. You know, if you're somebody that wants your employees to work 12 hours a day, you're probably not going to settle in Spain. And you're probably not going to work with folks from Spain. Not that they don't work 12 hours a day, but they're going to work. They're going to go home, take a siesta, and then they're going to get up and maybe possibly work a little bit more after that. But not all people in the world have a 40-hour work week or a 60-hour work week. So time difference, you know, that can be a factor. Tax rates, inflation. That was another thing that I wanted you guys to kind of say here recently, because for instance, I have a friend who works for Bon Appetit. They just went up on their prices, but my friend bought a whole lot of product before Bon Appetit went up on their prices. So they were trying to sell the product at the higher price that Bon Appetit was going to charge, but they bought it at that lower price before it went up on the supplier. So, you know, there's a little bit of way to kind of pad the pockets up front when you're dealing with inflation, but inflation over a long period of time, everybody's going to feel the repercussions of it. And then the availability of raw materials. One thing that we need to look at, and this is going to be an ongoing thing, if you're looking for business opportunities, is recycling. And, you know, I'm not talking about, I'm sorry, my dog's looking crazy. Sorry about that. So the recycling, what I mean by that is the heavy industrial type recycling, where we are taking cars that are no longer in service and melting them down and extracting, you know, the zinc, the heavy metals, all of that. So that big industrial type of recycling is what, you know, if you want to get into some kind of production company, that's a good avenue to research, because that's going to just be more and more, you know, we're throwing away, we're landfilling, but, you know, eventually those landfills are going to turn into recycled, you know, whatever that might look like at the time with the technology we have. Another thing that you want to consider, you know, COVID, the pandemic had a lot of things shut down for a while. So it might have been better to have local supply chain folks during COVID than it did to have, you know, people globally. So it really just depends on where we are in the world and what time, what's going on in today's society, to kind of figure out how deep your supply chain can go. And that's something that every company, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in service, healthcare, whatever it is, that, you know, you have to be on top of that. And we don't call it, I can't remember the word now, but most companies are calling themselves agile manufacturers now, instead of, you know, what they would call cutting edge before, where, you know, you're versatile. Now you're agile. You can change products, you can change suppliers. You have the ability to do all of that rather than just be stuck in that one thing where all your eggs are in one basket. Does that make sense? So let's, let's switch back over to. Where was it? Let me get this back up here. I'm not sure what I did with my screen. Give me a second. Okay. There it goes. All right, so our case study, the TATA case study, like I said, I don't want you to do any kind of write-up on that. I just wanted you to really think about all the items in the PowerPoint that we just talked about. But the Zycall case study, they're actually asking you. I'm not sure where that screen is. There it is. Okay. They're asking you to prepare the productivity part. So what would that look like? We're given 2 years here. We're given the consumer price index or the producer price index has increased. So what might that look like if we were going to do this together? Maybe an Excel sheet. Does somebody want to read this for us while I get my Excel sheet going here? Got a volunteer.
What is it? What do you,
Just read our case study here, the beginning of it, so we're kind of have the background. Can you see it on the screen?
No, you can't see it, but I have it pulled up.
Okay.
Bob Richards, the production manager of Zycol Chemicals in Houston, Texas, is preparing his quarterly report, which is to include a productivity analysis for his department. One of the inputs is production data prepared by Sharon Walford, his operations analyst. The report, which she gave him in this morning, showed the following. Production units, 4,500 in 2018, 6,000 in 2019. Raw material used, 700 in 2018, 900 in 2019. Labor hours, 22,000 in 2018, 28,000 in 2019. Capital cost applied to the department, 375,000 in 2018, 620,000 in 2019. Bob knew that his labor cost per hour had increased from an average of $13 per hour to an average of $14 per hour, primarily due to a move by management to become more competitive with a new company that had just opened a plant in the area. He also knew that his average cost per barrel of raw material had increased from $320 to $360. He was concerned about the accounting procedures that increased his capital cost from $375,000 to $620,000. But earlier discussions with his boss suggested that there was nothing that could be done about that allocation. Bob wondered if his productivity had increased at all. He called Sharon into the office and conveyed the above information to her and asked her to prepare this part of the report.
Okay, so I'm going to share my Excel sheet. Hopefully you guys can see it. I thought I was sharing the other. So basically, I just took from the case study and made a little sheet here. Now, the difference is this producer price index. So the way that we can figure out, you know, the equivalent of 2018 and 2019 is this producer price index. And we're trying to find the difference here. So when we divide that 120 into 125, we get a difference of 1.04. Okay, and that's our, we'll say delta PPI, our change in PPI. And then when we times these numbers, like the 2018 to 2019 number, then we can see if, you know, we were productive. You know, Bob wants to know whether he's been productive. Well, if you're just looking at numbers, then, you know, it looks like you went down, right? Because your costs are so much higher. But the producer price index is the ratio that we need to be looking at here. So if we say 125 divided by, so I'm just going to do an equals and do 125 divided by the 120. That gives us our factor that we times out. So when we are looking at it, we take the difference here because we've got our adjusted costs because of that. Let me move some. I'm running out of screen, so I'm gonna move this. Hopefully it follows. Okay. Y'all still see it?
Yes.
Yes.
So we've got this material cost. And it says material used, but the material cost per barrel is 320. The 1 year. Let me just put this out here. So per barrel was 320 in 2008, and then in 2009 it was 360. And of course these are just dollars. So we have a difference there with the adjusted costs. So what we're looking at, what we're trying to find, is we times this number because this is the higher, you know, we've looked at it as our costs have went up, but the price index has also went up too. So we times this number by the difference that we found. So if we're looking at it, it would be in the Excel, we do 360 times this factor here, which gives us, no, I'm sorry, it's not times, it's divided by. Let's say, how did I get that? It's divided by. So $1.04. Round it up a little bit. Yeah, that looks much better. And so that's my actual adjusted cost. So if I was working on the same price index from 2018, this would be what it actually cost me. Okay, so we're kind of what I call Zing it out. Whenever you're dealing with statistics, if you have 3 different factors that are non-related, say you've got one machine, you've got a wind factor, and then you've got maybe a temperature factor. Well, all of those three factors are completely unrelated, but you Z it out to make it a common factor. So we find this common value that makes all the variables even, so we can actually look at the data and compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. So that's what we're doing with this price index here. When we say that the producer price index was 120 and then 125, the change in that price index is what we can divide into this 360 to see that our adjusted costs, if we were operating at the same producer price index as we were in 2018, it actually looks a little bit better than what this number is in 2019. Does that make sense? No. I don't know, because I can't see you guys, so I don't know if you're understanding or not.
I will say that this chapter was kind of difficult with the way the questions were worded. Going
Okay,
through the homework for it, there were a couple I got wrong and had to redo, and that I had to go through the help me with this question. So
okay. And that's
But,
another reason why I like this setup, because it does give you that opportunity to take you back and you know, there's a lot of interaction. And some of them we even have videos showing you how they got there. But the
Yeah, I
main
have-
thing is, go ahead, Crystal. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I had a problem with one of the questions, and then when I finally figured out I was missing a step, or it was missing something, it wasn't telling me the whole thing, but then I finally figured it out, and then I got the other half of the question correct. So
Okay.
it was confusing at first.
Yeah, and I'm trying not to put a slew of homework problems in there. I'm trying to even it out where some of them are just multiple choice and some of them are actually problems. So, you know, if you guys get the feeling where it's just way too much, let me know and I can adjust, you know, what problems are in there, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and that it was good for me because I was glad to you know, have a couple of those to work on. So I mean, to me that it was okay.
Okay. Good deal. So the other change, you know, these are the total costs here, but the change per hour, the compensation rate went from $13 to $14 an hour. Okay, so if we're looking at this the same exact way and we're trying to compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges, because right now it's apples to oranges. We've got two different years, but also two different price indexes. So we're basically just taking that difference there, that ratio difference, and dividing it into the newer number. So it's going to look the same as the adjusted costs, and we could actually, you know, Excel would let me just drag that down and it would do it. But just to show you again, it's the 14, which I could click on this, divided by the D7, which is the difference in ratio there. So then that gives me, if this was the same year with the same producer price index, then I'm really only going up 44 cents instead of $14. So what is the producer price index? Anybody know? So when
No,
we're,
I don't.
when we're adjusting, you know, maybe we can sell our product for a little more because prices have, you know, adjusted from year to year. Okay, some things may not change, which affects the overall net value. Say a gallon of milk, you know, a gallon of milk today is about the same that it was 20 years ago. So it's put many of the dairy farmers out of business because the price of milk didn't change as other prices did change. You know, the price of gas, the price of equipment, the price of getting their milk to processing center, that kind of stuff. So many of the small farmers went out of business because of that. But when we look at the producer price index, yes, this was the price in 2018, but we could also sell products at this value. It's a ratio value, so we can't just say 120, but then the producer price index went up in 2019 with our costs. So it looks like that our costs are so very different, and we're actually, you know, on the downhill slide, we might be going out of business. But when we start putting this producer price index number to it, it's not as bad doom and gloom as what it seems. Okay, because our costs went up, but yet our product value also went up. Does that make sense now?
Yes.
So basically, we're taking all of these numbers. Like we could take the 620,000 and do the same thing. So if we did an equal and then divide it by this ratio, and this is actually our costs instead, and capital costs, of course, are the most on this one anyway. And then basically you're going down and you're doing this for all of them. And then you're looking at your total cost versus your adjusted cost. And this would be the adjusted cost here. Okay, so I've got my solution sheet that I'm just going to toggle over so you guys can see. I never expected you to go all the way through, but I'll show you just the first top of the part here. It's actually asking. Let me see if I can get to that page now. So basically, this is kind of a finished product, what you would see if you did all of the factors for the adjusted costs on each one of those items. And then, you know, the total cost, you're just doing year by year and with the total adjusted cost, which would be all of these that we divided by that ratio of 1.04. Okay, so that would be all that I would be looking at there. If you went on and did a multi-factor analysis, you could come in here and you're basically just playing with the numbers. What would it look like if we did this? And so forth. And we're looking at it, if we do go through this is actually a positive change. And this is a positive change. So the most negative change would have been the capital productivity. But what we're saying here is if the more research that we do and the wider supply chain that we have, the easier it is to keep these costs the same or at least adjusted in a positive way if something does happen. Okay, and that's kind of the moral of the story. So for whenever you guys do this, basically what I did on the spreadsheet there, you can use spreadsheet, you can do it by hand, doesn't really matter. But just this first portion was what I expected to see on that. And then you say, well, how do I know to do that? Well, you kind of don't unless you are up on producer price indexes, but that's why we did this case study, just to show you the difference. And I'm recording this, so I will put this on Canvas, the recording. And if you guys don't get to come to the Zoom, later on, maybe next week, I'll do it probably maybe on a Monday next week, or actually I want to do it every 2 weeks, but I'll probably do it on Monday next time. And then I'll do it on a lunchtime another time. So if you can't get to it, I'll still put the recording on there, and I'm giving you the answers in the recordings. So it's not something that I wanted you to spend hours and hours trying to figure out. It's just something that we would talk about normally in class. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Do you guys have any other questions?
I think I'm good.
Okay, and most of you have had classes with me before. So you know that I'm most of the time a pretty reasonable person, or I like to think I am. So if there's something that you have questions about, don't freak out about it. I've had people get up and leave my class on a Thursday afternoon and go straight to the hospital because they're having a heart attack. And I don't even know about it until Monday when they come back, and they never asked not one question, and I thought they were fine. And so, there's worse things in life than freaking out about this class. So if you have a question, you don't understand something, you save it for Zoom, shoot me an email, shoot me a text. And if it's something that I think is super important, then I'm going to say, hey, yes, this is how you do it. If it's something that, hey, I'm just posting that just as FYI, don't worry about it. Okay. We'll get through it. We'll figure out due dates. We'll figure out all that stuff. Don't work ahead, because I actually took some of the chapter 2 questions off this week that was on there before. And there was a few people that had already worked ahead and did more than what they needed to do. So just do what was posted for that week. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Y'all are a hard show to entertain.
Mm.
The thing about these, I was one of those people who did all the questions in chapter 2. So,
Okay. I didn't want to point you out there. I didn't know,
yeah.
but I knew that they were already had some people finished.
Yeah. So some of these, I created a calculator in Excel form, and a lot of them, I got different results than they did in the homework. And it was a matter of, one, they were looking for a percent difference. One, they were looking for something else. And it was just, this was a kind of tough one. So
Okay.
I spent several hours on this one, and it wasn't that I was trying to, I was trying to work ahead. I won't lie. But
And sometimes, hey, I've got a lot going on this weekend, I'm going to work ahead. That's not a problem, but don't try to go too far ahead. I really didn't mean to have chapter 2 homework up just yet in there. I guess I had turned it on by accident, but you don't, like in this class, you're not looking. So yeah, you might want to get $345.60 for that answer, so you can be exact. And you're an engineer and you want to be exact. I understand that. But as long as you are following along and kind of seeing how it's done, you might not need to use this until 6 months or a year from now, and you're not going to remember that exact figure anyway. You want to remember that you know how to go back and work your way through the process so you can do it then. Okay, so when you need to apply it, you want to have that base knowledge of how you can remember and go back and do it. So if you're a little bit off, but you kind of understand, you know, they wanted a percentage, but you had the whole number or whatever it was, you know, that's not terrible. You still understand the process. Okay. Does that help, Michael?
It does, and it also helps to pay attention to the decimal places they tell you to do it to, because if you calculate to farther decimal places, 1 cent difference in the answer will consider it wrong in the homework.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're
Yeah,
dealing with 620,000, you know, I don't know what number is, but that's the big number on here. You know, 1 cent for every $620,000, that ends up being a lot of money. So yeah, I can see that. And there have been times where I've went through some of those problems myself, and I know that I'm doing it correctly, and it'll still tell me I'm wrong, and I look and I'm like 1 cent off, like you're saying. So yeah, don't let it get to you. Any other questions? And I'll leave this up right here so y'all can read it a little bit. No other questions? Again, I don't want you guys to freak out about this stuff. You know, if we need to spend an extra couple days on something because you didn't have time to get it all done, or if, you know, if you have a question, we'll get it answered. It's not something you need to be staying up all night trying to figure out. Okay?
So for this week's case study, we just kind of make a Excel document similar to like what you made in Zoom call tonight, and that's good
That's
enough for
it.
this week.
That's all I'm looking for. Okay, just so I know that you have looked at it and went over it and kind of understand the process.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
Just- Just this first part.
All right, yeah, you going over it during this definitely did make me understand it a lot more clear. I was definitely overcomplicating it.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't want to turn this into just a complete finance course. I want you to see how to do something, but also how it can relate to what you're doing at work. If you ever have to do this end of it. And you will, you know, most of the people that graduate this program are going into some kind of management type position, maybe not right off the bat, but you know, eventually you'll get there, because a lot of people don't have 4-year degrees, and that piece of paper, it really talks when you go out there.
Some of this has come in, this has been used in my line of work. If I buy a new piece of equipment, that's comes off the bottom line. And
Mhm.
if they don't account for a $250,000 CMM and the piece price, it hurts the company. So
Right. And just something simple like a new chair for your desk. You know, you buy $150 chair, and your product that you're producing sells for 10 cents a piece. Well, just to make profit to buy that $150 chair, you know, you might have to produce 200,000 of those. So, you know, people don't understand that. They don't put the two together. You know, they just know, hey, I want that chair. But then the company might suffer because of it. Is everybody else? I know we've got a few more that jumped on here. Are you guys okay? You got any general questions? We talked a little bit about the setup of the course earlier. If you guys missed that and have any questions on Canvas or something of that nature. All right, guys, if you don't have any other questions, we've been on here for an hour. I'll put the recording on Zoom and you have the answers to the case study. Just, put it down on Excel sheet or a Word document and shoot it to me in Canvas and you'll get the 100 for being on here, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's good to hear from all of you guys. I'm going to end it if you don't have any other questions.
All right, thank you. Bye.
You good? All right. See you
You're welcome.
guys.
Have a good night, Amber.
You too.